You are listening to the Bat Flip Podcast, a baseball podcast from Belly Up Sports and the Belly Up Podcast Network. Here are your hosts, Damian and Matt.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Bat Flip Podcast. My name is Damian, here with my co-host Matt, coming to you on February 8th of 2022. Got a pretty interesting episode this week. Going to talk some more about the CBA negotiations or their lack of, and some other news on that front that's came out in the past week. We have a little bit of an update on the Trevor Bauer situation, and then after that, we will look into the NL Central Division breakdown. But before we get into all that, Matt, we missed you last week. How are you doing?
Doing good. Last week, obviously I've talked about Auburn a lot on the show. My fandom and stuff. They were playing. They're number one in the country basketball. They actually lost tonight in overtime, so they'll probably drop out of number one. But they're having like a historically great basketball season. So last week they were playing their biggest rivalry on Tuesday night, and I was not gonna miss it. So let David fill in for me, but yeah, it was. I hope everyone had enjoyed having David on the show and been meaning to get him on for a while. And but we'll I missed being here last week and ready to get some baseball talk and I haven't talked baseball in a while. Feels like so ready to go.
Yeah, it's been I couldn't do it later on in the week, so we did have David on last week. But glad you're back this week. We'll be sure not to make that a regular occurrence there.
Okay.
But let's go ahead and we'll kind of just start off with some news that broke. I believe it was Thursday of last week. And that was that the MLB owners and the players had been going back and forth. We thought we actually had a little bit of progress. And then it kind of got stonewalled. And we talked about that a little bit last week, me and David. But now this week, the owners have basically requested federal mediation from the government, to try and help resolve this lockout a little bit sooner. And that would have to be agreed to by the players. The players ended up declining that, saying, we don't need that. We just need to do this ourselves. The owners basically said, well, we're not going to offer you a new deal. Then we're not even going to try to do it unless we get mediation. But it is a little bit of a weird scenario because the owners' meetings actually started today in Florida. They're supposed to go, I believe, through Thursday. And at the end of those, Rob Manfred is supposed to talk to the media. And the players are doing their own little meetings this week, I believe, in Arizona to start the week and ending somewhere in Florida. So there is a little bit of hope that maybe they get to the table Thursday. But as of right now, it looks like we're kind of in a stone wall between the players and the owners.
Yeah. I think there's a few things that I like that I've seen out of the negotiations, but the same time, it really is frozen on the terms of it. I really like the idea that the sides came up with on the bonus pool for pre-arb players. I thought that was a really cool idea because there's some players that are just insanely good that are just are getting paid like major league minimum, and the fact that they can't take advantage of how good they are in case they get injured later in their career, and they're get paid. I mean, they're obviously get paid a lot more money than all of us, but they're getting paid a lot less money than they could be making. I think that's a good idea. I think that the total number figures that are coming out of that are just they're so wildly different. It's hard to believe, but um, just for example, but some of these things, a mediator. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know how all this works exactly. Honestly, to me, a mediator sounds like a good idea in general because I feel like a mediator is probably a good way to get a fair, agreement. But obviously, the players don't believe that the mediator would, side with Major League Baseball, and I mean, they feel like they don't necessarily need it unless sides are making a real offers to each other, and it would just be like a third party getting in the way. So I understand that. But yeah, I mean that's big news. I think the deal could get done somewhat quickly with a mediator, but obviously, both sides seem to think, or the players seem to think that wouldn't get a very good deal for them. So, I don't know if it's great optics just for general public for the players to decline that, but it does make sense if you kind of think about it. So.
Well, the players' big gripe about that is that when the last lockout happened, they did have mediation, federal mediation, and it didn't really help much at all. It didn't do anything. The players see it more as a media stunt at this point from the owners by trying to save face and say that, hey, look, we're trying, and the players don't want to help us. It is interesting that some of the players have come out recently. I know, like Stroman came out, I believe, a couple days ago, tearing apart Rob Manfred. Paul Sewald, who's a Mariners relief pitcher, was on in Seattle radio show today and basically said, like, look, we don't need a mediator. We just need you guys to give us a proposal, and then we can keep going back and forth with that. And then Adam Wainwright had a charity event this past week, and he even was basically saying that at this point, the owners don't even want to give us what we had last year. And basically, he had said that if they gave us the exact deal that we had last year, spring training wouldn't be postponed. Nothing would be we'd be full on back into the off season and have a full season of baseball this year. And it just seems like, at least from their side, that the owners don't want to even give them what they had this past year. So it is pretty interesting, and it just seems like it's on the thing that it's getting a little nastier. But hopefully, the nastiness leads to somebody finally just saying, like, screw it, let's just fix this.
Yeah, it does. I'm starting to get a little bit bothered by the fact that both sides are trying to plead to the media about everything because it seems like it's just trying to distract themselves from the fact that they have to get together. Like whoever's getting knocked in the public eye, like it doesn't help anybody for everyone to think that Major League Baseball's organization, the owners are all corrupt. It doesn't help anybody to think that for MLB trying to make people think that the players are being greedy and trying to take advantage and they're getting paid enough already. That doesn't help anybody. I wish that both sides. I mean, obviously, you're gonna have news come out, and there should be news. Everyone needs to know, what are we getting baseball? That's the question everyone's asking. It should be news, but both sides with all the publicity and media and the MLB blacking out all the faces on their websites and taking down all the articles and I just don't I wish that the sides would just kind of both of them would just kind of handle this, but especially on MLB's side has been very unprofessional. I think the players have come across a little bit whiny at times, but MLB side's been unprofessional with some of the stuff they've done. I wish they would just stop with the you know mumbo jumbo and just get to business and talk. Figure things out. What is important to you? The players, I think service time manipulation is very important to the players. So, I think that pre-arb thing that they're talking about and potential, bonuses for, having players start on the opening day roster, stuff like that. That's good stuff. That's stuff that they can base off of. Um, I don't think that I'm worried that especially with the way service time manipulation is going anyways, but I think that I wish they would just kind of try to handle this, and they're making a fool out of, especially MLB, making a fool out of themselves by the media stunts. So the media is not going to be what determines what the agreement is, and it sounds like both sides are trying to eliminate guilt by trying to make themselves feel less bad about it by cut out the media, especially MLB. So I don't, I wish they would just kind of stop with the talk and get it done. So.
Yeah, it's the age old thing. You use the media to drive your narrative, um, and MLB is notorious for doing that, especially Rob Manfred. And then the players are just kind of using, like, oh well, you guys are doing it, so it must work for us too. And it does seem like bad optics, but at the end of the day, I mean, it's just kind of is what it is. They do need to just get down though, because you're in serious jeopardy if this thing goes on 2 or 3 more weeks of at least spring training really being delayed. I mean, at this point, pitchers and catchers are usually reporting, I know, within the next week or so. Usually it's around the 15th. But I think that could probably be pushed back until like the 22nd, so 2 weeks from today, and everyone would be just fine. Maybe even March 1st, and you could still fit in a good size spring training and start the season on time. But the longer it drags on, the worse it's looking for a full 162 game schedule at least. But anyways, let's go ahead and move on to the next topic. We got a little bit of a a little bit of news on the Trevor Bauer situation today. If you don't remember, back in, I believe it was June, he was accused of sexual assault and um, rape charges as well. That has been, he had what am I looking for? They had a trial for a permanent restraining order that back in, I believe it was September or August or September, that was denied. And then he had an investigation going through the Pasadena Police Department and the LA County District Attorney for the past 6 months. And then that today came to a conclusion with them saying that they were not going to bring any charges against him. He is still being investigated through Major League Baseball, and he's suspension from them is still probable because through the Players Association's agreement, even if there's no charges brought against you, you can still have a suspension if found the MLB finds that something went on there.
Yeah, so that's I think that's obviously good news for Trevor Bauer that the criminal potential criminal charges are over, and I don't think there was too much grounds for criminal charges to start with. I'm not going to get into the graphic details of the situation, but I don't, and like I said earlier about the lockout, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know, but it's definitely one of those things that, I mean, Trevor Bauer, how much has he alienated everybody to allow him to come back? Is kind of the thing. Like, the criminal stuff is cleared. It's kind of a gray area situation. That's all I'm going to leave it at on the actual situation, but definitely a little bit gray area. I think that how his teammates have obviously been against him, and he's alienated a lot of people. So how is he gonna come? Is he gonna be able to come back? Is MLB gonna allow him to come back at how quickly, and what's gonna end up being the outcome from this? But I think obviously it's good news for Trevor Bauer, and it sounds like something where I don't know if I don't know if MLB is gonna get away with putting him in a like some kind of like permanent, semi-permanent, like year-long suspension type thing. So that doesn't really sound like, compared to other stuff like domestic abuse and stuff that has happened, and the suspensions that have been levied for that. The longest one I think I've seen was a season, and that was a really bad situation for the season long. Most of them are 50, 60 games. So I think if you look at him, you know I would assume that it would probably be a pretty long suspension for him, but obviously, he's already served, as we saw with the Marcelo Zuna situation. Serving that time on administrative leave. You lose that money now, but you're allowed to play, immediately if your suspension time has already been served. So we'll see what happens with that. I don't know if we'll ever see him play again. I doubt we ever see him play again with the Dodgers, but there's probably a lot of money at stake for Trevor Bauer, a lot of money on the hook there, because if he's allowed to play again, then he's going to get paid his contract outside of the suspension time, whatever that ends up being. So that's really a really big win for Trevor Bauer, because if he had been, if there had been criminal charges levied, I think that they might have had grounds to, kind of nullify that contract. But we'll see what happens. Obviously, it'd be interesting to see if he was able to come back, and what he would look like and stuff, and how people would react to it. But as of right now, I don't really think it changes too much in the immediate future.
Yeah, in the immediate future, it really doesn't. It's going to be interesting to see, how MLB does go along with it, because, like you had said, Sam Dyson was the one that was basically suspended for a whole year, but he actually had charges against him and stuff. And you do have, with the Ozuna situation being very recent as well, even though that was more like of the cops, kind of the different
Cops
optics
butchered
there.
that one.
Yeah, so it's going to be interesting to see, because obviously we don't know all of the details of everything that happened in this, and behind the scenes and all that. But it is going to be interesting to see if MLB does allow him to do the, hey, you were suspended from basically the middle of June through, and that was how many ever games, and then now you're basically gonna be suspended, maybe the equivalent of a season. Like, how long would they suspend him into this year and then not pay? I don't know. It's gonna be weird, but at least that part is handled, and we'll see. I think MLB kind of has a little bit bigger issue on their hands right now than the Trevor Bauer investigation, but
Yeah.
at least the the actual through the police department, and that is handled. But we'll talk more about that when the actual MLB investigation gets over. But let's go ahead and move on to the NL Central division breakdown. And we'll go ahead and start with the Milwaukee Brewers that won this division at 95-67. You look at the list of the people they've lost so far: Avisail Garcia, Jackie Bradley Jr.'s in that trade to the Red Sox, some bullpen pieces with Hunter Strickland, Brad Boxberger, Manny Pena, Daniel Vogelbach, and Eduardo Escobar. And then if you look at who they've added, really not too many impact players, but they've added Trevor Gott on a 1-year deal, Hunter Renfroe through that Jackie Bradley Jr. trade, Mike Brasso, Pedro Severino, and then they did sign Rex Brothers to a minor league contract.
Yeah, so honestly, for the Brewers, I don't really think they've lost that much. Obviously, they lost a few bullpen pieces, but none of those were kind of their primary bullpen pieces. I mean, like you got Brad Boxberger was pretty good last year, but like Axford, Strickland, Daniel Norris, those types of guys, Colin Ray, they weren't really that big of names and stuff. You look at the guys that lost their lineup. Really, the one that hurts is Avisail Garcia. I think that Renfroe and Brasso kind of make up for the loss of Jackie Bradley Jr. and Eduardo Escobar. You do look at Pedro Severino and Manny Pena is kind of a wash. They're different types of players. I think Pedro Severino probably hits a little bit better. Manny Pena, is a better defender. They did add Trevor Gott, to replace some of those bullpen arms. But I think this is a situation where, the Brewers offensively didn't really have that many good names last year anyways. So, but they returned a lot of their offense outside of Garcia, who was their best hitter. I mean, they returned Narvaez, they returned Colton Wong, they returned Willie Adames, who was fantastic last year. This is a team that looks to me like he probably needs to add somebody on offense. They just need a big bopper. They need a big bat. I mean, Yelich, is he going to return to form ever? Like, because this is 2 years in a row that he obviously kind of give a pass on the COVID year, but this year he wasn't very good. He's kind of a league average type hitter. In the field, he's not what he used to be. He's probably better than he was last year, this year, but he's not quite the same guy. You look at you probably could add maybe like a center fielder or, somebody just a general, like maybe a corner infielder, first base, third base. They need somebody, they need a bopper in that lineup. And then, but their rotation is so good. I mean, their rotation is so good. You know, uh, uh, at the top of that rotation, and with Brandon Woodruff, Corbin Burns. I mean, Freddie Peralta took that step up last year. They still got Adrian Hauser. They got a bunch of guys, and then their bullpen with Hader and Williams shutting things down late, and all they really need in that bullpen is maybe a little bit more depth. Maybe you can make a couple of those under the radar type signings like a Trevor Gott that they did sign. And then maybe like a 5 starter, and their pitching will be close to the best in the majors again at that point. Because you look at you look at this team, I think they're definitely probably the division favorite. But I don't really think they're a true World Series contender unless they add a little bit more offense. So it'll be an interesting team to watch, though. 95 wins last year was impressive.
Yeah, it's a really good team. It really is. They would greatly benefit from Yelich getting back to MV Yelich form. And basically more of it is just if he's able to get his power back. Like his eye is still pretty good. Like he still hit a 362 on base last year. And that would get better if he was able just to hit the ball, more consistently. Only having 9 home runs and almost 500 plate appearances is not very Christian Yelich like. So they definitely need him to rebound. And then you mentioned it, some sort of another big bat. If that's an outfield DH, first base, third base type guy, they just need somebody else in there to help, just keep the lineup moving. That starting pitching it's probably the best 1 through 5 in the majors at the moment. Hauser was really good last year. Lauer he's really solid. I mean, a 3.19 ERA last year. And then they have a guy like Aaron Ashby still down. He reached the majors this year, but he's, a good prospect that they have as well. A depth bullpen arm, another guy, like if you can get another Trevor Gott or find one of those, one of those relievers that had a down year last year that you can turn around. And the Brewers are one of those teams that's really good at finding those. I think it was JP Fierson or something last year that they
Fire Eisen, yeah.
Fire Eisen, yeah, that they ended up trading for Willie Adames. He was doing really good. So I expect this team to be that division favorite, and if they are able to, to add another big bat once you get into the playoffs, that top 3 to top 4 in the rotation, it's going to be really hard to beat if you can score at all. Because not many times where Woodruff, Burns, or Peralta is going to give up more than a couple runs each time they go out. So, um, but let's go ahead and look at the next team with the St. Louis Cardinals finishing second in this division, going 90-72, 5 games back of the Brewers, but they did make it as a wild card team last year. If you look at who they've lost so far, Carlos Martinez, Matt Carpenter, Kwang Young Kim, Luis Garcia, J.A. Happ, Wade LeBlanc, John Lester, who ended up retiring, Andrew Miller, and then just a little side that I put here that they did lose Mike Schilt, because I think that's going to be a pretty significant deal for them.
Yeah, for sure. Their additions. They brought in Stephen Matt. From the with the Blue Jays last year. Stephen Matz, who's Steve Cohen, apparently his least favorite person. But I think you look at you look at this team, and I mean, I think one of the key things for this team is for their pitching to get and stay healthy. Last year I thought year before last, Dakota Hudson kind of took off a little bit and looked really good. Then he got hurt, didn't pitch this year. You need Flaherty to have a healthy season. Um, you look at some of their relievers like Jordan Hicks. Can he have a healthy season? If their pitching is able to get and stay healthy, I could see this team being good. I like their lineup. Nolan Arenado, Paul Goldschmidt in the middle of that. I think Dylan Carlson continues to improve and take a step forward this year. He's been a pretty impressive looking player in his first year and a half in the big leagues. And then some of their other guys. I mean, Harrison Bader's a really solid player in the outfield. Tyler O'Neill obviously it was really good. Even though I don't look for him to have the same season he had this year, I think he's still a pretty good player. They could maybe even use a bounce back from Paul DeYoung. And one thing this team might have this year is a little bit of the team of destiny type thing to them. I think they're going to be really, really fighting to try to send Yadier Molina and Adam Wainwright out on a high note, because I think it's probably both of their last year. So, it'll be interesting to see how they perform. And, 90-72 last year, they had a kind of special finish to the season with their last, that long win streak late in the season to take over in the wild card race. And, they ended up losing in the postseason on a complete, heartbreak in the wild card game that they really felt like they had a good shot to win. So, we'll look at the Cardinals as I look at them as like a borderline contender. I don't think they're quite as good as the Brewers right now, but maybe if they add a couple more pieces in the post lockout free agency, I think they could probably get to the level of the Brewers. So they got a few more pieces they need, but I think maybe another arm of some kind. But I think they'll be a pretty good team this year.
Yeah, I expect them to be a really good team as well. They do need to figure out what they're going to do at shortstop. Is DeYoung going to have a bounce back, or are you going to let Sosa just kind of take over that role, which he kind of did towards the end of last year? Um, and then are you going to see Nolan Gorman this year, and are you going to see Matthew Liberatore this year? Liberatore could be a big piece for them, to fill out the back end of that rotation if Miles Michaelis is struggling like he kind of did last year, and then help take a little bit of that load off Dakota Hudson. Because you did say he only pitched, I think it was 8 2/3 innings last year. So it would be nice to get a guy like a Liberatore in there, maybe let him get his feet wet a little bit. And then Gorman, I mean, see what he can do. I mean, he's been playing some more second base. I don't know if they would think about moving Edman over to short full time and letting Gorman take over the second base job. It would kind of all depends on what you might see in spring training, but it's a really solid team with not much turnover. You're gonna get what you're gonna get from a guy like Paul Goldschmidt. I expect Arenado to bounce back with his average and on base a little bit. He still hit for power last year, but the everything else was kind of not there. So it's a really good team. They still have those young guys developing, like O'Neill took that step, Carlson, Bader. It's just, can they reach that next level and compete with the Brewers? But I at the moment, if they can make maybe one more good size addition, maybe if that's at some sort of a shortstop, area, and then I think they compete with the Brewers. But at the moment, I don't think they're really a team that can compete for the division against the Brewers. But let's go ahead and look at the Cincinnati Reds that finished third in the division at 83-79, 12 games back. And they're going to be one of the more interesting people to look at post-lockout, as they've already lost Wade Miley, Tucker Barnhart, Nick Castellanos, Michael Givens, Michael Lorenzen, and Asdrubal Cabrera. And then if you look who they've added, basically all their ads have been minor league guys. Nick Quintana, they got in the trade for Tucker Barnhart. Andrew Knapp and Jake Bowers are both minor league signings, but they had a decent amount of major league time. But the Reds are looking at that team that are basically going to go into that fire sale mode, trying to trade anybody with a salary. Can you get anything for Moustakas? Are you going to trade Sonny Gray? Is Luis Castillo going to be traded? It's going to be interesting to watch this team, especially after the lockout.
Yeah, I thought the Reds coming into the season would be a possible contender, or coming into the offseason, but with some of the moves they went ahead and made, I think it's kind of like I think it's probably unlikely. They really haven't added that much. I will say they have gone through and added a lot of minor league deals that are players who they could potentially end up getting some good big league use out of. Some guys like Andrew Knapp, Jake Bowers, are guys who have been in the big leagues at times, and I like the add of Trey Wingenter, who had been with the Padres. He's a guy who had been injured a good bit, but he throws extremely hard, and that could be an interesting one. But I think, and obviously I'm mentioning him because I had a class with him at Auburn. But I think you look at their losses are big time. I mean, Castellanos was their team last year at the plate. Other than Joey Votto, who had his resurgent year. Um, you look at some of their other losses. I mean, they're losing some veteran players like Asdrubal Cabrera. He's always been an underrated veteran. Um, you know, uh, Tucker Barnhart. It sucks to lose him at behind the plate because he's a guy who can really keep a pitching staff together. But I mean, if you look at their team as of right now, the way they're structured, they could still contend. They need a couple bats, but I like their pitching. Luis Castillo is going to have a bounce back year. I think he had a rough start last year, but he kind of figured it out at midseason. Sonny Gray still really solid, and Tyler Mahle took a step forward. So there's a few pieces on the Reds took a step forward, and their lineup they still got Joey Votto, who was great last year, and they've still got the Rookie of the Year Jonathan India. Tyler Stevenson had a big year. You look around their lineup, maybe Eugenio Suarez bounces back a little bit. Um, but I mean, you take a look at. I mean, their relief pitching is really what kills them right now, and that's really not that tough to fix. I mean, just go sign a few bullpen arms, but we'll see what the Reds end up doing. There's all that speculation that they might trade everybody. So, if they start doing that, then get what you can. I mean, it would. I think it kind of stinks to trade away this team that they got right now because I think they're not that far away. But if they can't afford it, then go ahead and get what you can. Don't get stuck in purgatory of 500 not making the playoffs. And I hate the tanking, but I mean at the same time it's the correct strategy. I mean, being 81-81 is not going to get you anywhere. So you know get some either go get some pitching and contend, or in a wide open division, or go ahead and just trade everybody, because which I don't really understand. You probably got a better roster now than you would after 2 or 3 years of rebuild. So um but anyways, that's not a that's a that's a, this was a tough one for the Reds. So
Yeah, and like you said, it really came down to, basically their whole offense was Castellanos last year, especially after Jesse Winker got hurt. Winker started off the season really well, and then got hurt and missed a good chunk of time, and then Nick Castellanos just kind of took over from there. And losing him to free agency, and there's really no hope to get him back. He's already basically said he wants to go to some sort of a winning situation. And then the Reds have basically, by all their actions, have started saying that they're, acting like they're one of those teams that can't afford the payroll that they were even at, that they were kind of maxing themselves out then. And now they need to hit the button and kind of recover for, 2 or 3 years that way. So, they obviously aren't going to be able to re-sign Castellanos. It's a great hitter's park, but what hitters are you going to really get to come there? if your team's not able to sustain the success that they need. And then trading guy, if you are going to trade a guy like Sonny Gray, which there was a lot of rumors, they even thought right before the lockout, they thought it was going to go up to the last minute that he could get traded. So you do have young talent still. You still do have Luis Castillo. You still do have Tyler Mahle. You still have Jonathan India. You still do have Tyler Stevenson back there. You still have Nick Senzel if you can ever get him to, be a productive player. But it's the guys like Votto who's there, Eugenio Suarez who's going to be, uh, you know, he's going to need to be re-signed pretty soon. He doesn't hit for a lot of average and on base, but he hits for power. Mike Moustakas is another big bat that you brought in that's probably just holding you down more. Like if you can get rid of some of those guys and bring in a little bit more productive but cheaper guys, and then you have a decent starting rotation with those three. If you keep Sonny Gray, make a couple little moves in the bullpen because I do think that they have some solid pieces down there. They just need to kind of work everything a little bit better. And then you do have a guy like Hunter Green, who's going to be one of the more exciting prospects to come up, and he might even reach the majors this year, if not next year, along with Nick Lodolo as well. But it does seem like the Reds, they were a team that everyone was high on. I really thought that they were going to be a lot better than they were, and I think they just fell short of expectations, and now they're like, well, we just can't really sustain it since we've really lost Castellanos, and we can't afford to bring him back. So we just need to go the opposite way. It sucks, but I mean, at some point, you can't be the Yankees, you can't be the Dodgers, and just have that sustained success with signing people all the time. And I mean, even the Yankees didn't do that for a good amount of time, but it sucks seeing a team that has the potential like this have to head that way. But it's also kind of ties right into the next team in this division. And that's the Chicago Cubs at 71-90. When they were 24 games back, they kind of did the exact same thing, or the thing the Reds should have done, and probably trade everybody at the deadline. That's what the Cubs did with trading Rizzo, Baez, and Bryant. And then if you look who they've lost through the offseason so far, that's Matt Duffy, Zach Davies, Austin Romine, Robinson Chirinos, Jose Lobaton. And then who they've added, they added Wade Miley from the Reds. That's another one I didn't even mention we did mention that. They added him from the Reds, though. Harold Ramirez. They re-signed Michael Hermosillo, brought in Clint Frazier, Jan Gomes, and then the big signing is they brought in Marcus Stroman.
Yeah, so this is they're kind of the anti-Reds, right? Because
Right.
you look at the Cubs, the team that I don't think they've got any chance to compete this year with the roster they had before the offseason started. I mean, their roster was just completely. I mean, like their best hitter was going to be what? I guess Wilson
Schwindel,
Contreras, or I mean,
maybe
is it
even
got
Schwindel.
Wilson Contreras or Schwindel? But I mean, Schwindel. You look at his stats last year; he had a fantastic rookie season, but a lot of his numbers were inflated by BABIP too. So, and his plate discipline, him and Patrick Wisdom both, their plate discipline was not super great. I mean, they struck out a lot, didn't walk much, and that's something that's kind of a red flag a little bit. I mean, it works for some guys and it might work for them, but um, you know, I look at them as a team that like they were barren with talent after all the trades they made last year, and it seems like they made enough moves to get back to like a 500 type team right now. I mean, Marcus Stroman is going to be a nice move, but I kind of question that move, not because I question Marcus Stroman. I think he's a good pitcher, but a 3-year deal for a team that just traded away all their pieces just seems like it's not really doesn't really make that much sense to me. Like, um, I think it's like it's one of those deals where you might just be bringing in a pitcher to pitch for 3 bad teams, so it feels a little bit like you could have spent that money on something where either you get a guy that's on like an 8 or 10 year deal, like a Carlos Correa type guy, or you go to or you maybe make a couple trades where you pick up a bad contract and a top prospect or something with that money. Because I know the Cubs have a lot of money to spend, but it feels like they've done enough to get back to being kind of a 500 level team, and maybe it's not over. Maybe they go back in the second part. You mentioned earlier about a rumor that they might look at bringing Anthony Rizzo back. I'm sure that's possible. I'm sure Anthony Rizzo would probably accept that if the Cubs decided they wanted to do it. Um, there were some rumors about Correa, and if you add those two guys and you keep working on that pitching staff. I mean, right now that pitching staff looks like Marcus Stroman and not a whole lot else that I'm super excited about. I mean, Kyle Hendricks, I guess, is still pretty good, but he can get roughed up a little bit sometimes these days. And outside of those two, like you don't really have all that much. So I think, pitching wise, I think that this team could have, and they have some bounce back candidates. Like Ian Happ's probably not as bad as he was last year, and we'll see what happens. I'm not super bullish on the Cubs, but maybe if they went out and made a bunch of big moves, they're obviously trying to win this year because they're making all these moves. So maybe if they went out in the post lockout, period and make a couple of really big moves, maybe they could get into contention. Because, like I said earlier, this division is kind of wide open. So they don't really need like it's not not it is not impossible for them to get into contention this year, but they're gonna need a lot. So.
Yeah, if they were able to win the lockout, because the Stroman point, it's a good point. The only reason it makes more sense is if they're willing to spend and make big moves this year, or even next year. But it seems like they're well positioned to do that this year. Like you said, the rumors about Correa, the rumors about Anthony Rizzo, even the rumors about them being interested in Matt Olson. So maybe it's a scenario where you're able to sign a guy like Correa, and then you go to the A's and you go, hey, maybe what could we do for Matt Olson and Chris Bassett, or Matt Olson and Frankie Montas, or Matt Olson and Sean Manaea, because I feel like you need another starting pitcher in that rotation with Hendricks, with Stroman, and then you have Miley, but I think Miley's more fit for a kind of a 4 role, and then you could see what you're going to get with Adbert Alzolay and Alec Mills. So you need some other rotation in there, and then it feels like you need 2 more bats in that lineup to really make you a contender, not only in the division, but you could probably get away with making one of the pitching moves and one of the hitting moves and probably be in the fight for a wild card, but nobody wants to try and just fight for a wild card. You want to try and win your division. So, maybe that's a scenario where it seems like the Cubs want to spend big money. It's just, will they do it? And will they do it through just strictly free agency, or will they try and make, hey, maybe here's one big free agency move and then here's one big trade move that can fill a couple holes with the one deal, instead of trying to go out there and sign a shortstop, a first base, or an outfielder and a pitcher on top of that. So, and then they kind of need to help for some health. You're going to have Nick Madrigal and Nico Horner, who, Horner hasn't been able to stay healthy for a full season, and Madrigal, he had a good rookie, start to his rookie year, and then he missed basically all of last year. So he needs to, and that's right now projected to be your starting middle infield. And then you kind of need to figure out what you're going to do with Contreras. Are you going to trade him because you do have Miguel Amaya down in the minors, who seems like he's going to be ready with pretty soon. And there's been a lot of chatter around Contreras anyways, and I'm not quite sure that you're going to be able to re-sign him. So it might be more beneficial that if you can't re-sign him, that you trade him beforehand, so you're not at the deadline where people don't get traded for all that much, for only a half-year rental of a catcher, really. So the Cubs are going to be fascinating to watch as well, because they can make a bunch of big moves, but they can also sit back on their hands and kind of just wait everything out.
Yeah, like I said, what final kind of thought on the Cubs is that they, if you look up and down their lineup, there's not really anybody that scares you. Like,
Right.
I know Schwindel and Wisdom were pretty good last year. Contreras is a solid player. They got some solid players, but nobody really scares you. You look at their pitching rotation. There's nobody that really scares you. I mean, Marcus Stroman is really solid. Kyle Hendricks can be, when he's on, he can still be really, really good. But there's nobody that you feel like you cannot, get a couple runs off of. And their bullpen needs work. So I mean, I think that they've made some decent moves and have built up their farm system really well. But there's a lot more that needs to be done there. But speaking of a lot more that needs to be done, um, let's talk about the Pirates, which we're not gonna short sell any team here. We talk about them all, and you might not hear anybody else out there talk about the Pirates, in the off season this year, but they went 61 and 101 last year, which is honestly a better record than I expected. Um, honestly, they had one good player that broke out that kind of helped that, but their losses were Shelby Miller, who I have no I
Who's that?
remembered. I remembered. Yeah, I remembered he played on the Pirates. Like once I saw it, for like I think he had like one pitch when he pitched one time for them or something. Trevor Cahill, who I mean I didn't even know he was still in the big leagues. Wilmer Defoe, who was a bench player for the Nationals, and I saw that he was with the Pirates last year and was like, okay. Stephen Brault, who honestly might have been one of their better pitchers that they non-tendered, I think, or declined an option, or put him on waivers or something, and he wasn't just a straight up free agent. And Colin Moran, who is kind of a veteran, he'll probably pick up a bench slot somewhere. And then Chad Cool, who they non-tendered, and I mean I don't really feel too bad about that, but I think they've actually improved their team through additions though. Roberto Perez is going to really be a nice addition to their team. Although Kevin Stallings is another loss, and he I don't know why I didn't mention him already, but he he's probably him and Roberto Perez are kind of similar, except Kevin Stallings probably hits better. But Jose Quintana, that's a fantastic signing for a team like the Pirates to get a buy low guy who, maybe he figures it out again. And if he does, then you got somebody you can maybe get something for at the deadline because he's still got some talent. And Zach Thompson they picked up from the Marlins, who's a young guy with talent. And I went ahead and mentioned Greg Allen because he's been a starter in the big leagues before. They picked him up as a minor league deal, I think. But he or off waivers or something, and he's gonna be on their team. But my outlook for the Pirates is just, I mean, they just keep waiting for their farm system to get there. I mean, they've got a few pieces at the big league level that they could maybe um, look at. Maybe make some improvements. Like Mitch Keller is a guy who definitely, for their future, they really need him to figure it out. And then you've got O'Neal Cruz at shortstop, and Cabrian Hayes. He could hopefully he comes back well from injury, and O'Neal Cruz will kind of be playing his first real big league season this year, and we'll see how they do. But other than that, I mean, maybe also kind of look at what there's been some talk about maybe a trade of Brian Reynolds, which I think would make a lot of sense because this team's probably not going to be in contention in the amount of time that Brian Reynolds is under control. So maybe trade him and get that farm system really kick started a little bit. But it'll be interesting to see what the Pirates do. But I can't imagine them improving their record at all this year.
Yeah, the Pirates are a rough team. They were one of the swan songs right there when they had that, the Andrew McCutchen, Starling Marte era. And then now that they've had to go into this kind of rebuild mode, it's been hard to watch. And then trading a guy like Jacob Stallings to the Marlins, that kind of helps. Getting a guy like Zach Thompson as a little bit as a younger pitcher for you might help some. But really, the thing they just need to do is just keep developing, Cabrian Hayes, try and get some of your young pitchers. If you can get what you can get out of Thompson, if you can kickstart Bryce Wilson. I know he struggled last year after he came over. If you're able to get anything good out of Quintana and flip him at the deadline, people are always looking for left-handed pitchers. Even if they're struggling, somebody will flip some sort of a prospect for him. And then you mentioned the young pitchers they have of Mitch Keller and even Quinn Priester, but I'm not sure he's going to get up there this year. And then if it's there's been talk of the Brian Reynolds trade for a couple years. You mentioned it. Like, is that finally going to come to fruition? I mean, he is 27. You do have him under control for another, I think 4 years. So does it make sense to do it now? You could probably get your best package now, especially coming off the year he just had with the 302 average, 24 homers, 390 on base. It might be time to strike while the iron's hot right now and get as much as you can get for that control, and kick up that farm system. Right now, I mean, I don't know. You got to give your fans something to look forward to, and Brian Reynolds is kind of Reynolds and Brian Hayes are kind of those two guys. And then what are you going to get from O'Neal Cruz? Is he going to, going into his first full season, is he going to make the majors this year? He's already had some off-field issues by himself. So is that going to rear its head again? If not, then, can he be as productive or the star that everyone thinks he can be? Because he shows a lot of intangibles, but how raw is he? Is he ready for that step? And then just kind of keep finding that young talent. Like you said, it's not going to be a team that in the next 2 or 3 years is going to be fighting for a wild card spot. So they just need to be able to find and develop something. So maybe at that point, 3 or 4 years down the line, you can look at, hey, maybe they can start looking for, contention of a wild card at least.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I think you make a good point about wanting to have your fans excited about something. Um, I think that's still something that's probably important to them, especially being a small market team. They need some of that revenue come in, but I don't know. I mean there's not gonna be anybody excited about the Pirates this year, and man, I think I still look back and think you know they made some mistakes. I mean, they could have Austin Meadows, Tyler Glass now, and Shane Baz. I mean
Yep.
that was one trade for a guy who really he was decent when they traded for him, but here's red flags there. So I mean they blew it with on that trade, and that's like that's not just I mean that's three like two guys who are a star pitcher, a guy who's kind of a really solid regular as a hitter, and then a guy who's potentially going to be a star pitcher that had a really good looking rookie. Or I guess it wasn't his full rookie year, but it's kind of a debut this year for the Rays. So, I mean, that was just you kind of look back on it, man. Just try to fleece another team like you got fleeced in that deal. That's what the Pirates need to do this year. With Brian Reynolds, is the guy that they can do that with. Fleece a team like they got fleeced for, and make up for it. So
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that trade did set them back quite a bit. I mean, if they had those guys, you're looking at a team that's a lot more productive and probably finishes with a better record than the Cubs did this year, and maybe even right there with the Reds fighting for a wild card spot. Because you got to think not only did that, those three players would have been there, but then they would have been able to make other moves on top of that once they knew they had sort of a contending team. And it sucks when teams, small market teams especially like that, make big lopsided trades like that, thinking they got the one star that's going to push them over the edge, and then it really sets you back for what 4 or 5 years at that point, when it's all said and done. So who knows? But hopefully the Pirates here in the next couple of years start showing some signs of life, because I think it's Pittsburgh's a town that always usually supports its teams, especially when they're good. We've seen that with the Penguins and the Steelers, so
yeah,
they kind of need the Pirates to be good.
yeah, I was gonna mention it was so fun when the Pirates were doing good for a few years. Like when they
Yeah.
had the Andrew McCutcheon and Pedro Alvarez and Russell Martin were all playing so good, and they were in the playoffs. And I mean, I remember the atmosphere at those games,
Oh
like
yeah,
like the Reds game when they were mocking Cueto and stuff like that.
absolutely.
That was such a great atmosphere, and it really stinks that they can't put a competitive team out there all the time, because that's a really cool ballpark, and it's
Yeah.
a town that loves their sports. And when the Pirates are good, they love their Pirates. I mean, I know that's the Pittsburgh Steelers town, but when the Pirates are good, they love their Pirates, and it kind of stinks to see them struggle like they are right now.
It really does. And you make I was that's kind of what I was hinting on with the McCutcheon and Marte type era, was that atmosphere, in that ballpark. It goes when the Pirates are good, it's a lot of fun. So I really do wish they can get back there, or hope that they can get back there relatively soon, because it's something that baseball's better when these smaller market teams like that are able to have fun there and be competitive at least. Even I'm saying that as a Dodger fan, but that's a little weird. Anyways, but I don't. It was a jam-packed episode today. We have hopefully we get some news from Manfred, and then the CBA negotiations when they talk on Thursday. I'm pretty sure we're going to have a laughing stock episode of clowning Rob Manfred next week, because he's going to say a lot of idiotic things. And then if it's not too much, we'll jump into the NL West division breakdown next week. But you got anything else you want to wrap up on?
Not necessarily. I think you kind of look at the way that everything's going right now, and I'm hopeful that we get baseball. I think we're gonna miss part of spring training, but I'm still hopeful we get baseball in the beginning of April. Maybe they can get these negotiations really rolling here soon. This is a good week to regroup. I think they've talked some. They kind of got to a standstill. They had made a little bit of progress. I mean, there were some ideas like that, like I mentioned, that arbitration bonus pool. I mean, that pre-arb bonus pool. Like that's an idea that both sides kind of agreed on. That's kind of something they could do, but the dollar figures were way off. And I mean, honestly, anytime you have a negotiation, like both sides are going to have to come to some kind of agreement. Like I think both sides need to understand that, like MLB, you know, if you offer 10 million and they're asking for 100 million, you're not going to get away with offering 15 million. And the
No.
players, like if you're off for 100, if you ask for 110 million, I hate, as much as I think that, there's been times you've got shafted in the past, you're probably not going to get 100 million. Like if you, it's kind of one of those things. Like both sides need to kind of understand that they need to come to an agreement. And I really hope. My one hope is that both of them see how important it is to get this done in a timely fashion, because like I said, right now, you know, they're not, this isn't getting done in a timely fashion. And if you start missing games, then the casual fans, the ones that watched that Field of Dreams game last year, the ones that boasted those TV ratings in the postseason higher than they've been in years, they're going to be the ones that are really going to just kind of quit watching. Like us hardcore fans are going to keep watching regardless. There's going to be a lot of people that quit watching because of this, and thinking it's just a bunch of people whining at each other. So I really hope that they understand the sincerity of this situation, because it's so easy for them to get caught up in, we want this, we want this, we want this, and get caught up in the other side's not doing their part. And it's, you kind of get caught in that bubble a little bit, and don't realize that if neither side does their part, then you're not gonna, that it's just gonna hurt everybody. It doesn't. It's almost like, if you have, you got to, somebody's gonna have to cut it loose at some point, and it's almost like playing chicken. I mean, it's, somebody's gonna have to cut loose and say, hey, you know what, this pre-arb pool, we think that we deserve a lot, but we can negotiate this number down a little bit, or MLB can say, okay, well, you know what, $10 million for the top, whatever, however many players it's talking about doing in that. I forgot the number, but like that's not even going to barely boost them at all. Like we need to allow more than that. So I think there's obviously pros and cons to everything, and one side's going to come out a winner. I think both sides need to understand that you're not going to get a perfect agreement. Somebody's going to come out a winner, somebody's going to come out a loser at some level. But man, it needs to happen. Like it needs to get done. It's going to be really frustrating if they can't come to an agreement in a timely fashion, and we end up with nothing. So
The main
um,
problem that I have is that I don't understand why both sides aren't more invested in trying to make it happen and willing, at least from the owner's side, willing to lose games and threaten to lose games when we
it,
literally just came off a 2020 season when it was shortened through the pandemic, and the owners are literally whining and crying about how much money they've lost and how that was such a bad thing for baseball. And then now you're saying, hey, we just got back to a full season. We probably just had one of the best seasons of all time. We had the excitements here. It's back.
yeah,
Baseball's kind of found its niche again. And then, hey, right after that season, we're going to come back and we're going to tell the players, well, basically, like, we're willing to lose the games again. We're willing to go back into another shortened season, and we're willing to lose that money there to make our point to you, even though if we just made this agreement, the money we're probably losing here in this negotiation is probably overall less than what we lose if we lose games or threaten the
right.
season in general.
Right, right. I agree, and I think that's a bad look. I mean, I think it's a bad look to think. I mean, you're both, somebody's gonna have to. There's gonna have to be some compromise here. All right, there's gonna have to be. I mean, and neither side's gonna get everything they want. You know, I don't know what the answer is gonna be, and I don't know all the details of it. But we're gonna have and honestly, the thing that's really starting to bother me is the fact that it seems like both sides are talking to the media, especially the MLB side, more than they're talking to the other side of the bargaining. I mean, it seems like the players are talking to the media. A lot of times they're asked about it, which I mean, I don't mind them answering if they're asked about it, but it seems like they're tweeting out and stuff more than they're negotiating, and MLB is doing these little chicken stunts like taking down everybody's faces off their website, and taking down all the statistics and taking down all the articles about present players and all this stuff. Like, I mean, come on, like that's just childish. Like the players are being a little bit like just kind of like maybe it sound like they're whining a little bit, but MLB's just being childish. Not we're not going to talk to you. I mean, it's like, come on, man. Like just figure it out. Talk with them. They're not going to hurt you. Talk with them. Like, I don't care if you're mad at them or not. Like, I mean, people are you're gonna have to learn to get along with people that you know. I get that both sides are upset. I don't know why the MLB is so upset. I mean, I can get why the players in some facets are upset, but like we're not going to talk to you. Like, I mean, come on, man. That's just they should be sitting there negotiating every single day right now. Every single day they should be sitting there for 8 hours discussing things, coming up with ideas, figuring out how they can come to an agreement, and they're not even talking. I mean,
Right.
it's just
I was telling somebody this yesterday. I don't understand what's so hard about negotiating. Why can't you get into a room with these aren't massive groups of people meeting, first of all. These are like 3 from each side. It's like 6 or 8 people maximum in this negotiations. Like, why can't these 3 to 6 people, I don't even care if it's a damn Zoom meeting. Like, we've found out that you can meet from wherever you want to meet from. You don't even have to have hotel bills or any of this. You can get into a meeting and literally negotiate for 8 hours a day. And if you actually did that face to face and you had those people negotiating and you just sat there until you got it done, I bet you get it done within a week and a half to 2 weeks. Like, the negotiations don't have to be this hard. All it has to be is, what do you want? What do I want? What are you actually going to accept? What am I actually going to accept? And where's the middle ground for us? Like, and that's the part that I don't think they're at. It's basically at like, hey, I want this. This is what I'm going to accept, and I'm not moving off of this from the owner's side. And then the player's side's like, well, we want this, and we'll give you like a little bit under this, but we're not going to give you way under this. Like, and then the owner's like, well, we see that you wanted, now you're talking a little bit more, but then how about if we shrink it to this? And it's like, that's not a good look for either side. But I don't understand, from my side at least, how negotiations can be so hard. Like, it doesn't take that long to tell somebody something and then them to say yes or no. And then it doesn't take that long for them to rebuttal to you and then you to say yes or no. Like, I feel that if you went for one objective of day, like if you went on there and say, okay, starting tomorrow on Wednesday, we're going to go into this meeting and we're going to resolve the pre-arb bonus pool negotiation. You're telling me after 8 or 9 hours, you guys couldn't come to some sort of an agreement for the pre-arb negotiate, like for the pre-arb bonus pool and how many players and what it's supposed to be? And then the next day, hey, then let's look into service time manipulation and then talk for 7 or 8 hours there. And then that's solved. Like, you could literally take it each step for one day and we'd be done with this whole scenario. We're at what, 69 days or 70 days of locked out baseball at this point?
yeah, and there's been like 5 meetings.
Yeah,
I mean,
no, I mean, maybe 5 meetings.
and every one of them's been like an hour a piece. It's not like they're sitting there for 8 hours at the negotiation table. Like,
Exactly.
since like we've had something like 4 or 5 meetings, and every one of them's been like an hour, hour and a half. Basically, what they're doing is they're just laying out what their proposal is, and then the other side won't talk to them. Like, I mean, that's what it is every time.
The other side's,
It's
well,
getting really.
yeah, the other
They're
side's like,
immediately
let me
saying,
take this and go
yeah,
look over it for
and
a
then they
week
don't,
and a half.
and then they come up, and then they don't even they don't use any of the terms to negotiate off of. They're just making a new one that's completely weird. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, I think that there's kind of the final thought, because we're starting to kind of ramble on a
Yeah.
lot. I think that when it comes to baseball, there's a sentiment from the owners, and I think this is kind of the big deal here. There's a sentiment from the owners that baseball, because of the lack of salary cap, is the most player friendly, you know, thing in sports, because of because the other places have salary caps, they have max contracts in the like in the NBA,
And they're not
um,
fully guaranteed.
and they're not fully guaranteed. So, and in some ways it's true, because if you get to a free agency in the major leagues, like if you make it to free agency, you're gonna make more guaranteed money than any other sport. I mean, it's true, but at the same time, there's a lot of things that need to be looked at that are, I think for a lot of baseball players, the young days when you're in the minor leagues, which there sounds like they've addressed a little bit of that, through just kind of minor league stuff. But when you're in the minor leagues, and then when you first get to the major leagues, like if you look at like take a look at the NFL, you get a quarterback in the draft, like pick them first overall. I mean, they're gonna be making like millions and millions and millions of dollars immediately. Like look at baseball, you have to be lucky enough to not get injured and to perform till your age, 25, 26 to even get a slight pay raise. And then, now if you make it a free agency, you're going to balloon. But I think some of what the players want to do is take some of that money that the top level players are making at age 30, 31 when they hit free agency, and they want that money to go to guys who are just, because I mean, there's been so many careers where you had such a great player that played like 40 years in the big leagues, and made league minimum, and then got hurt and never was able to fully capitalize on that. Like, how many times have we seen that before? And I think that's something where the owner, the players really think that it's not quite as friendly to the players as it might appear from the outside, since they don't have a salary cap and they don't have max contracts. Because I mean, like I say, you go you got to be in the majors like 7 years and be super good before you can get that big payday. So I think that's kind of what the players want to look at, and I think probably what ends up is going to have to happen at some point is that there's going to have to be some kind of limitation on what players when they hit free agency, there's going to end up being some kind of limitation on those contracts in exchange for having a lot more money paid to younger players. I think eventually, like that might not happen in this CBA, but I think that's eventually where this thing's going to head. So, but we'll see what happens. I'm obviously I'm optimistic and hopeful that something gets done pretty soon. I mean, I'd love to see baseball start on time. So, but that's kind of the final thought here, and hopefully
Yeah.
they figure something out. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know we rambled on a little bit too much here at the end of this episode, but I think it was kind of a little frustration from both of us of this kind of negotiation area, and this kind of our area where we could take it out and have you guys listen to us do it. But thank you guys for at least listening to us ramble and tuning into this episode of the Bat Flip Podcast, and we'll catch you guys next week.
So thank you very much, everybody.